So in this video, I'm going to introduce you to JSON, not the person JSON, but a format for storing and transmitting information. So for those of you who has never heard of JSON, you would ask, why do I care? Right. So as it turns out, JSON is actually very important part of how the communication over the internet happens nowadays. It's very, very integral to how the internet works. And so that's why we're talking about it now. So before we dive into JSON, let's take a step back and hopefully get a big picture of how the internet communication happens. So all of you know internet, there are many devices on the internet, right? So for like our phones and our computers and autonomous vehicles and your microwave ovens and all sorts of things are now on the internet. Now, in order for all of these devices to talk to each other over the internet, well, they have to speak a common language. Okay? So in computer science terms, a common language between different devices, that's what's called a protocol. Okay, and now the protocols on the internet, there are many layers to it. So in analogy, a real life analogy that I come up with, although it's not the perfect analogy, but you can think of these layers in terms of the English language. They would be kind of like, at the lower layer would be like alphabets like A, B, and C. And then on top of that, you will form words with A, B, and C's. And then with words, we can form phrases. And then on top of phrases, we have sentences and then paragraphs and then I don't know, poems and books and things like that. So those are the different layers of the internet communications protocols. Okay, now this whole kind of a layer thing, there is actually kind of a standard model for it. One of the most commonly used model is called the TCP/IP model. Some of you might have heard of TCP/IP, or at least IP, IP addresses and all that. This model dictates that there are actually 5 layers that describe the features and the functionality provided by each of the layers. At the lowest layer is the physical layer. Those are just basically wires, or for our Wi-Fi, it will be kind of the radio waves, that sort of thing. On top of that, data link. On top of that, network is where the IP sits, internet protocol. And then on top of that, there will be the transport layer, TCP/IP, TCP over IP, right? And then finally, there's the application layer, which are perhaps contains some of the more familiar terms such as HTTP, right, or DNS and things like that. Now, for most programmers, I know there are lots of informations here. For most of us, except those of us who would actually work at the network, the lower layer things, most of us would not be concerned about anything other than what's in the application layer. Okay, so that takes out, I hope, the majority of the complexity there. Now, of the application layer protocols or language, the one that you have heard the most, I think, is HTTP. And that's HTTP. That is the protocol used by the World Wide Web. Anything that starts with www, or many things that don't. Those things actually run on top of HTTP, and anything that has anything to do with the World Wide Web, such as the web pages, which are written in HTML and CSS and that sort of thing, or any images that you see, videos, YouTube videos, and all of those. Many of those things are transmitted over the HTTP protocol. Okay, so now that we're talking about how things are transmitted, well, before someone like you or yourself, well, mostly we don't do it. We make our device do it for us, right? So before we send anything in our phone or in computer over the internet, that piece of information, whatever it might be, it must be serialized. Okay, that's what that word is, serialized. And then when somebody receives information that we send, for example, a server in the cloud, yeah, like your Gmail server, anything like that. When they receive something, when anyone receives something, that information must be go through the opposite process of serialization, which is deserialized, so that the original information can be recovered. So I throw out two big words here, serialize and deserialize. So according to Wikipedia, the official definition of serialization is the process of translating data or objects, with that we're familiar with, right, such as the object in Python. It's the process of translating those data into a format so that the information can be either stored as in a file, or it can be sent over, for example, the internet, right? And then at a later time, they can be reconstructed, and that's the process of deserialization. So as an example, maybe a more concrete example, if you need another one, is that many of us use word processor to write an essay, let's say, or take notes and things like that. So if we use Word, we might use Microsoft Word, or we might use like Google Docs nowadays, whatever. So whenever we save what we type in those applications, that is the process of serialization. And then maybe right away, or maybe many years later, we'll open it. We'll open the same essay that we previously saved, and that is a process that is deserialization. Right. Another example would be taking a picture on the phone. Right. So and then you upload it to Instagram or whatever your favorite photo storage sharing site is. So whenever before you send that picture up the internet up to Instagram, for example, that your photo must be serialized first. And then later, when you send your link, or your friends who follow you, they retrieve that photo, they download that photo, whatever the format is in, and then download it and get it to displayed on, the exact same photo that you uploaded. They download it on their phone and see it. They see the exact same photo. So that is the process on their phone. That is deserialization. So this is something that we do all the time. We just might not be aware all the intricacy that are involved. Okay, so we keep talking about serialization, deserialization, but we want to get to JSON, right? So what does JSON have to do with any of these? So let's go back to the definition of serialization. It's a process of translating data structure or object state into a format. Okay, so the keyword here is format. And there are many different types of format for storing data. Right? Such as if we want to store a Microsoft Word document, many of you are probably familiar with the doc format for Word. For photos, the most common format is .jpeg, although there are many new formats nowadays. Apple uses its own proprietary format, etc. So these are formats for to serialize or to save particular type of data. And in the last decade or so, JSON has emerged as a very popular format for sending things over the internet, and it's not limited to a particular type of information. JSON can be used to transmit many different types of information over the internet. Okay, and what JSON is? JSON stands for, well, JavaScript Object Notations, and the pronunciation is actually JSON. I used to say that it's JSON, but I think that's incorrect. According to the inventor, it's called JSON. And what it is, it's an open source file format. It was actually invented almost 2 decades ago now by Douglas Crawford. It was, as the name implies, it was originally invented for JavaScript, but nowadays pretty much all languages have support for it. And one of the reasons that it's so popular, that it's kind of taking over everything, is because it's very simple, as we shall see, and it's very readable by a human being.